Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the next episode of the Mint Mob Podcast. Jason here, joined by my buddy Alex, as always, across the pond in Germany. We're going to dump into the usual stuff. But before we do, let's check in with Alex and see how he is, man. How's things?
Hey, man, it's all good. Great energy from your side today. Great. I love to hear that. Yeah, I think the reason for your energy spike could be the markets. We saw Bitcoin make a tremendous run this week, actually. Fear and Greed Index turned to greed for, when was it on greed the last time? I think it's like a couple of weeks ago. Bitcoin ran up to, what was the highest point? I think it was like around 123, right? It kind of dipped a little bit now to 119 or around 120. And it's crazy to see. Like it's for some reason, it's like what we always expect, or what we expected all the time. But when it happened, it kind of like pretty cool feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's surreal. It's definitely surreal. I mean, this is the type of stuff that if you've been following the market for a while, it's hard to believe is happening, but it's happening, man. And I think, again, my target this year is anywhere from 150 to 200,000. And my sell target before I got raped and stolen from in January was 120. So I had always expected 120, so it's cool to see it happening.
But like it probably does not feel good on one side as well, right?
No, it still feels good. I mean, it's, whatever you have, you always want to make sure it's multiplying. I mean, it's bittersweet, obviously, but what's done is done, and it's just time to grow. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other hand, Ethereum broke through the ever-existing resistance of 3,000 USD.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, what's interesting, I think we spoke about that some time ago when I said that the US dollar is so fucking weak right now that the euro all-time high is not even broken yet, man. How should I feel now?
Yeah, I don't know. You'll have to tell me. How do you feel now?
It sucks because obviously, I mean, it's also the fault of the current government that the US dollar is weak. Investors are pretty uncertain about, what's happening with the tariffs and all that stuff. And I'm not sure. I mean, right now it feels like what's like US dollar to euro. I think it's like 120 or something. I remember when I visited, it was a lot closer to be like 1 for 1. But yeah, especially considering that we could have rate cuts in the near future, where do you see the US dollar go? Do you think like it will regain trust, or keep going down compared to other currencies?
I think every currency is going to zero. All of them are going to zero, and the US dollar is just the best of the worst. So the US dollar is still the world's reserve currency for as long as we can hold on to that. That's still true. But the truth is, central banks are acquiring a lot of precious metals, and businesses are acquiring a lot of Bitcoin. So obviously there is trouble brewing, and a lot of people are concerned about that, especially in the, like real estate circles that I follow and the investing circles that I follow. Outside of the crypto world, people are pretty blind to what's actually happening in the real world. But the traditional markets are acquiring gold and silver, and that's not going to change. Of course, they might add some crypto to those holdings, but the traditional money is going to buy the traditional assets because of the fear of exactly what you're talking about, which is ever weakening currencies the world over. And so when we have this, the way out of that is to buy real things, because real things are always priced in a currency that's falling, means that you can basically preserve your purchasing power when you go to sell them. So this is why the housing market is watched so closely in the U.S., and getting people to purchase houses is so important, because it's basically become a store of like a savings account really for a lot of people, rather than a living situation. Just people have been trained to believe and understand that if you buy a house, it's going to quote unquote go up in value. They don't understand that that's not what's happening. The dollar's actually losing purchasing power, so it takes more dollars to buy the same house. And, this is true everywhere. And so, as long as people understand that In an inflationary environment, debt is an asset and real things are assets. I should say cash flow producing debt is an asset. This isn't going to change. This is going to be something that governments continue to do. And to be fair, when it comes to the U.S. at least, the Federal Reserve is not part of the government. It's a separate entity, and it answers not to the government. So while it can be influenced by what's happening in the world and what's happening in Washington, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency. It's literally a private bank. So they can kind of do what they want to do. They've been given carte blanche in terms of the policy that they create for interest rates. They set the price of money and they can print money, which when you think about it, is just a recipe for disaster. So at the end of the day, all currencies are going to zero. That's what's happening right now. And you're basically just looking for, how can I hold the best of the worst if you're in currencies? And right now that's the dollar. And I think more and more people are going to start looking at, how they can get dollars via the crypto markets using stable coins, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the stablecoin market basically opens up the world to dollar exposure, which is obviously a very good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you spoke about the Federal Reserve. Did you hear the rumors of Powell considering to step down?
I did hear that. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's no love lost between Powell and Trump, and at the end of the day, Powell, these Federal Reserve banks are filled with academics for the most part, and they don't understand the real world and like the real impact of what they're doing. And Trump, being a populist president, is just coming in there and telling people like, this is what's happening. Like, people are in incredible credit card debt. The interest rates are 30%. You can't discharge student debt even in bankruptcy. People need a reprieve. They need lower interest rates. And so he's pushing for that as a means of like trying to help people who actually want to learn how, or not learn how, but who want to pay their bills. But, he's dealing with academics who don't really care. These people are so disconnected from the real world that, they have no real understanding of what the average person's life is like. And I think this is true of pretty much everyone in Washington, which is one of the reasons that Trump was so popular when he was elected. So, that being the case, I could totally see Powell stepping down, not wanting to deal with the Trump administration at all. I don't think that helps anyone. And, I don't think anyone they replace Powell with would ever even necessarily be a better option, because, again, it's just going to be another academic. They're all just academics. They're all people who've not necessarily built businesses or run businesses, but they've been involved in financial markets, maybe worked for Goldman Sachs, worked on Wall Street, and then worked their way into central banking. Very few Fed chairmen specifically, but Federal Reserve board members in general have had real jobs. So, who knows what'll happen, but whatever happens, we're just going to get more of the same. There's no way out of it. And at this point, if you look at the debt cycle that we're in right now, the U.S. is basically 100%, like it's a 100% certainty that the U.S. will default on its debt at some point. Because what people fail to realize is when the Federal Reserve prints money, or when a central bank prints money, normally the way it enters the economy is through loans. Okay, so like if the Federal Reserve prints money, it sends that money to the U.S. Treasury to distribute however they're going to distribute it, or to the member banks. It loans it to those entities at interest. So for every dollar that's created, $1 plus interest is owed. Does that make sense? So you can, once you've started creating the debt and it starts to get to this monumental number that we're at, like into the 30 some odd trillion dollars worth of debt. Once you get to that place, the sheer amount of interest needed to service that debt just becomes insurmountable. And we're on this sort of debt spiral where people really need to understand this. Like when you borrow $1 that didn't exist, right? Until you borrowed it into existence, you borrowed the dollar into existence and then created a liability on that via interest. So that $1 that was created actually creates $1 plus whatever the interest rate is at that time. So it might create $1 plus 5 cents or $1 plus 6 cents for every dollar that was created, right? And so when you create magic money from thin air and then you apply interest, there's no way in hell you can ever slow the rate of the interest rate payment expansion. Because every time you create the dollar, you create a liability that's associated with it. And this is the thing people don't understand.
Yeah, but I feel like when you speak about all that kind of stuff, and this has been pretty this has been disclosed before. So I feel like, how come that the financial system has not collapsed yet? Because they just keep printing. Is that the whole solution?
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? A few years ago, what was it? It was going on in Europe. The big deal was Brexit, right? Like everybody was having this conniption over, like Brexit. Oh, Brexit. It's going to be the end of the world, blah, blah, blah. All that was really happening there was, the British were basically saying, we need our own central bank. That's really all that happened there. Like we don't want to, we don't want to be bound to the policies that all of the European Union are bound to via a bank that we don't control. That's really all that happened there, And people don't understand it. They think it's like about, like social change and, we're isolating ourselves and all. And nobody, that's not at all what it was about. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the ability for an individual country to print its own currency. That's all it was about. And that's all it will ever be about. And the European Union was always going to fail anyway. So like, at the end of the day, when you have like a third-party policymaker for your country that is in charge of the money supply, but they're not in charge of the politics, it will never work. So, because someone always gets screwed. And so, like at the end of the day, the goal of all of these people is to perpetuate the cycle. But again, when you borrow something into existence and you attach interest to it, again, you not only borrowed the thing into existence, but you borrowed an interest rate into existence. The interest on $100 at 5% per year is $5. Not a big deal, right? No big deal. All right, $1,000, 5%, okay, $50. $100,000, 5%, okay, $500. You keep going, right? $1 million, all right, now we're at 5,000. 10 million, now we're at 50,000. You just keep running up the number, right? And associate that with the debt liability that goes with it. When you get to the trillions, like we're at the $1 trillion point just in the US alone, the debt service alone can eat up your entire gross domestic product. And so at that point, that's when it ends. And they're not going to stop it because no one can get elected by saying, hey, you know what, guys, we're going to have to cut your benefits. We're going to have to stop doing all these ridiculous nonsense social programs and paying people to stay at home and pop out kids outside of wedlock. We're going to have to take away your food stamps or your Social Security or whatever the case may be. No one wants to hear that shit because everybody thinks they're owed it because they were told that they were owed it, right? So at some point, what you're basically saying is, all right, all these generations that came before me, they had the best of everything. They got the best part of the market. They got the best 401ks. They got the best returns. They got the best benefits. And you want me to suddenly like work my entire life and not get the same thing? How dare you? Imagine a politician running on that platform. But that's actually what has to happen. There's only two ways to solve the problem. Either you grow your way out of it, which means you produce, or you start making cuts. And the only place that all these fat Western nations can cut is all these ridiculous social programs that they have implemented over the last 2 and 3 decades. That's all they can do. They can't cut military spending, right? They won't cut their own salaries. That's never going to happen. The only place it's going to come from is benefits, quote unquote, again, with air quotes, the quote unquote benefits to the society that people think they're getting all this free shit when the fact is they paid for it their entire lives and they get a percentage of it back. So that's why, to answer your question in a very long roundabout way.
Yeah, it's always great to get it like in such a nutshell version. But obviously, this brings us back to to crypto and why it's so important to preserve your wealth, and to look at some reasons why crypto did such a pretty big run this week. We actually have Crypto Week in the United States. Washington is currently debating several crypto bills, and I looked into this, and we have I think you just mentioned stablecoins as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Genius Act, which defines stablecoins and gives banks sort of green light to issue them. Then we have the Clarity Act. I'm not sure what exactly that does, but I think it's just about clarifying which federal agency which agency regulates what crypto asset. And then, and this is actually one that I found pretty interesting, is the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act. And this is actually something that bars the Fed from issuing a central bank digital currency. And when I read that, I felt like, okay, the United States do not want like digital currency, which seemed pretty surprising to me. And then I compared it to other global approaches, and what I found out is that actually most of the countries are actually trying to develop digital currencies. We have like the Europe, obviously digital euro is in development. We have UK developing Britcoin. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a joke, but it's supposed to be called Britcoin.
That's pretty good, actually.
We have, it's actually funny, right? We have China, we have Nigeria, we have Sweden, Japan, digital yen. So why is the United States stepping away from that idea?
The CBDC Act is basically, it sort of touches on surveillance of private citizens, right? So here's the problem with central bank digital currencies, right? And we saw this in Canada during the trucker protest. And you may have even, I think there was some of this that happened in, was it Holland that did the farmers protest? I can't remember. But anyway,
I think it was, yeah.
Was it Holland? Yeah. And so you had, like in Holland, you had all these guys jump on their tractors, right? And like drive down the road and like collect themselves, at a city and sort of like blockade areas and that sort of thing, just to kind of get attention, bring attention to the plight of the farmers, right? Same thing happened in Canada with the trucker protest. All the truckers got together, they went into town and they basically blocked off the streets, and they're basically saying, you need to loosen some of these ridiculous regulations that you've put in place, specifically around COVID, so that we can get our jobs done, blah, 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 right? It was sort of a rebellion against, like government overreach. And what we saw happen specifically in Canada is we had people who had received, like Bitcoin, for example, from donors, or cash from donors, or even who had donated to some of the people who had participated in the truckers' protest. We had their bank accounts shut down. They were debanked. They were basically denied access to their own money. Okay. And so basically what it reminded everyone in the US specifically of, and in particular those in Canada who have more of a libertarian mindset, is that when you put something in the custody of a bank, you lose control of it completely. And whether they give it back to you or not is completely up to them. They can always find a reason not to give it back to you. In this case, it was government saying, we're going to seize or close or basically commandeer these bank accounts. All right. And so you had people who weren't participating in the protest at all, but who donated, who even had their accounts seized and shut down. And it took weeks and months and very long periods of time for that to be rectified. Meanwhile, they need to pay their bills and they don't have access to their funds, right? So when you're talking about central bank digital currency, imagine that you have to do business digitally now, and you're borrowing or making payments with or interchanging with other individuals, exchanging in the open marketplace, paying your bills with digital currency. Well, at any point in time, the central bank can say, you know what, we don't like this person. We're going to just shut down their ability to transact. So anything that's tied to that particular social security number or that particular wallet or that particular address, you know what? We're going to put a block on that. And now that person can't transact. So this anti-CBDC Surveillance Act thing is literally about that. It's like basically telling the government, it's meant, the idea of it is meant to prevent government from watching you and controlling you and then eliminating your ability to transact, which is super, super important. And of course, if we don't think about that and think about the considerations, you can really find yourself in a bad spot, just like the truckers in Canada or the farmers in Holland and so many others the world over.
Yeah, but like isn't that like it's already possible, right? Like through the whole banking system, like the government can freeze your funds if they want, right? Like how does it like differ with digital currency?
Digital currency makes it much, much easier. So like if the government wants to freeze your accounts, like if you're dealing with the feds and the feds decide you're doing some crazy thing and they want to freeze your accounts, yeah, they can, right? They can do that. It's going to take them a little while and they have to go through they have to go through some channels to make that reality. They just can't arbitrarily start shutting down accounts without major blowback. They have to have a reason for it, and it's got to be run up, the chain through the proper channels. In the situation of a central bank digital currency, it's immediate. Someone can literally shut you down immediately by issuing, some sort of command on a machine somewhere that basically severs all ties for you to do business with anyone, to transact with anyone anywhere. Like if I wanted to send you $20, I wouldn't be able to. I would just be shut down, right? At least now they have to go through proper channels, and on some level if you're being, investigated or if there's some sort of trouble happening that you need to protect yourself against, you can move your funds around, in a timely manner before, you lose everything basically. But to be able to have the ability to shut someone down instantly and give them no recourse, then basically you control them at that point, because now they can't fend for themselves, pay their bills, feed their family, buy groceries, whatever. Like they literally can't do anything.
Yeah, I get that. When I read about that first, I felt like, okay, digital currency, like obviously most of the money we have is digital these days, and it's not backed by bills and coins we have. Obviously it's all digital. At least like since we left the gold standard, it's all the money is backed by thin air, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But when you spoke about people being kind of like not able to move when we have the digital currency, that would probably need cash to be banned, right? Because like in European countries, most of the governments try to ban cash. They try to limit it and try to make it trackable. Like whatever people do needs to be trackable, and that's what they obviously want to achieve. As cash gives you some sort of like you're anonymous, and they can't really track what you do with your money.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, and a lot of people make money without paying taxes in cash and stuff like that. Do you have the impression that the United States tried to ban cash as well?
Yeah, for sure. This has been. Again, it's been sort of this way forever, right? Like if you look at what happens here in the U.S., it's not so different from what happens in other countries. And I can specifically speak to Canada because I've had experience with the banking system there. Like if I want to go to a bank here and I want to pull out 10 grand, for example, they're going to start asking me questions. Anything over 10 grand, you're going to start getting questions. You're going to start having to fill out paperwork. You got to show all your IDs, get your thumbprint, like all this different stuff. Same thing in Canada, same exact thing. Why is that? Well, it's because of all the things you just said. Cash is not trackable or not as trackable. And so if I want to transact in cash, they make it more difficult, especially if it's large amounts. And they don't want wealth leaving their country or their country's borders, right? So if let's say I'm a millionaire and I stick, I don't know, maybe I'm worth $50 million, right? and I stick everything that I own up for sale. I sell everything, I liquidate everything, and I put all the cash in, 22 duffel bags, right? And I try to fly to, I don't know, Bermuda or someplace, right? That cash is not going to be able to make the trip. It's going to get seized before I ever get on a plane. And they are going to basically commandeer all of your life's work and do whatever they want to with it and give it back to you if and when, and maybe they sort of kind of feel like it at some future date 10 years from now, right? So they've made it nearly impossible for you to move any form of wealth across border, which is, again, another use case for crypto. And they've made it difficult even to transact locally in cash. Like if you go to a hotel, for example, and you want to pay in cash, they look at you like you're crazy. It's like, no, we need a card. We need a card on file for incidentals. In case you destroy the room, we need a card. If you want to go to the seedy side of town where the hookers hang out, you might be able to get a room for $100 or something like that cash, but that's the only place that's going to happen. Try renting a car with cash. Not going to happen.
Mhm.
Try buying a house in cash. Not going to happen. They're going to wire the funds and you're never going to see it. Or if you do, it's going to be, again, jumping through 15 hoops. So this has been ongoing forever where they've tried to control cash because, they pitch it under the guise of, we're stopping money laundering and drug smuggling and all the rest of it. But that's such a small part of it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about control and knowledge. And there's no real goodness in that. So, the percentage of people who do bad things with their money is small. And if they really wanted to make a big dent, they'd go after the people who are looting corporate treasuries and government treasuries and taking bribes and all the rest of it. But, they're never going to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Regarding crypto, I mean, it is like we never know if it stays or if it gives you the privacy that it currently gives you. So, like I've heard ideas of of governments to make it mandatory for wallet providers that people have to type in their name and do some sort of KYC if you create a wallet. So if that ever happens, Bitcoin and all the other cryptos are not as um, anonymous as they are now, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's going to happen, though. I think what'll happen will be you'll have, part of your portfolio will be a public, sort of a thing. And then another part of it will just be like something you keep on the side and only you know where the keys are. That's cold storage and you have the keys. And I think that's how most people will probably end up custodying, at least most people who are like of freedom and liberty mindset. Everyone else is going to want someone else to custody it, like Coinbase or Binance or pick your favorite exchange. But for the most part, if you have things that you want to keep private, you will have the option to keep it in cold storage, but not the obligation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned Coinbase. Did you see all that stuff about the pudgy penguins that so many big foundations updated their profile picture? Coinbase, Van Eck, the ETF issuer, all of them came up with pudgy penguins profile pictures. Did you see that?
I have not. No, I haven't seen this at all.
It's funny because I saw that the pudgy penguin token surged like, I don't know, 50-80% or whatever in like 1 or 2 days, and I saw that they made an announcement that's going to be like big, not just in terms of NFTs but also like in general. And then I saw all these companies joining and wanting to change their profile picture. And like, I'd like to get your opinion on, do you think it's generally a good thing for the whole NFT market if you have like one big player who overshadows all the other projects and is like making so big waves? Because it's like looking at crypto. If you compare that to crypto, we obviously have Bitcoin, who's dominating the whole space. Do you feel like it pulls other projects as well? Like it kind of gives attention back to the NFT space? Do you think it's a good thing?
I mean, anytime the technology that you're interested in is adopted, it's a good thing. The worst mistake you can make is to want a market that you participate in to shrink. Like you want the market to constantly grow. And whether it's you having success or someone else having success, the fact that the market that you're participating in is having success is always a good thing. It tells you you're in the right place. And so, like right now, like you mentioned, Bitcoin is dominating. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Bitcoin is dominating right now. But what is it dominating as? It's dominating as a store of value, right? Ethereum is not a store of value. And I mean, Jilly, I love you, but Ethereum is not where I'm going to hold my savings, And neither is Solana, to be fair. Like, I'm not going to hold my savings in Solana, right? Solana is a technology that has a lot of potential to grow, just like Ethereum is a technology that has a lot of potential to grow. But, the majority of my quote unquote value would be held in something like Bitcoin because of the institutional and government adoption the world over. And that's going to be what Bitcoin quote unquote does. Like when people say Bitcoin doesn't do anything, what Bitcoin does is it preserves your value, right? Through space and time for all eternity. That's what it does. And that's all it needs to do. And so if you have a situation where you can acquire Satoshis, via stack, like I acquire extra Satoshis via staking on stacks, and I just let it accrue on my account. And I don't care what happens with stacks. It's just paying me sats. Who cares, right? Because I know those sats are going to be worth, a shit ton more than they are today. 100x what they are today is my terminal velocity price for Bitcoin. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about domination, there's tons of room for other databases or chains, whatever you want to call them, to rule different parts of the marketplace. Like traditionally, ETH has been the world's computer, and it started out as a technology that was sort of almost like a fork of Bitcoin in terms of like, hey, Bitcoin guys, we want to do smart contracts, and Bitcoin guys are like, no, we don't want to do that. So Vitalik says, okay, well, I'll just go do my own thing. So he goes and he creates his own thing and includes smart contracts with not a 21 million supply cap, but a 210 million supply cap. Well, it turns out that when they switched from proof of work to proof of stake, the token supply now went to infinity. So this is the big problem with Ethereum, all right? And this is the big problem with like Cosmos, for example, because they kick out tokens every 3 seconds. Solana kicks out a lot of tokens, and there needs to be a burn mechanism or a spend mechanism that makes sure that you soak up those tokens. And no one knows what that percentage is ultimately going to be. So no one can tell you approximately how many tokens of Ethereum or Solana or Cosmos or whatever is going to ultimately exist, because the systems just keep creating them as a form of payment. So the price of those tokens is directly dependent on supply and demand curves, more so than something like Bitcoin, which has a fixed supply. We already know it's going to be maxed out at 21 million. And unless something changes drastically in terms of adoption, everybody's going to fight to get their, the little piece of that pie, right? So, I think at the end of the day, if you're Ethereum or Solana or, whoever, you have to look for other avenues to grow in, and you want that to be a growing market. So like Solana, for example, released tokenized stocks on their platform the other day. Okay, fantastic. That's an amazing thing that Solana's doing. And they're working with a lot of different teams to ensure NFT technology continues to expand, like Metaplex, for example. So they keep looking for ways and ends inside Web3 that they can attach themselves to and become an integral part of. And as long as that is the case, they will find a niche, and they will ultimately be known for that niche. And the way I see Solana is it has a ton of business and artwork type use cases, which are ultimately business use cases. I'm just kind of lumping it all together. But we specifically play with artwork inside Goodfellas. So, I'm just kind of separating that out. But ultimately, it's a business use case. Like we're tracking provenance and we're buying and selling artwork on the chain. Ethereum's the same thing, only there's a little bit more of a programmatic sort of background with Ethereum, because it was built by programmers for that specific purpose, to program smart contracts. So when you think of ETH, you think of like compute more than anything. And then it evolved into like the largest art chain because it was the only chain that you could basically use for that sort of thing in its infancy, right? So all of these things will ultimately determine, where these things go in terms of like dominance based on what they specialize in and what they do best. And people will gravitate toward who does it best. So if Pudgy Penguins is doing plushies better than anyone else, then people will gravitate toward Pudgy Penguins. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I keep reminding people to look at, for example, look at the Solana market cap. I mean, the market cap almost had to double, in order to surpass its old all-time high by, I don't know, 30 or 40 bucks. I think it was at 250 back then, and we had a high of around 290, and the market cap almost doubled. And welcome to inflation,
Yep.
And but this also reminds me of why do I love Bitcoin so much, and why do I try to put as much money as possible into Bitcoin, and just until quantum computers fuck us all. But until then, it will be a great time, I think.
Yeah, that's not going to happen either. I mean, everybody keeps talking about quantum computers. Quantum computers aren't going to change the security of blockchain. All that will happen is we'll update the security protocols on the chains. And, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I was listening to a podcast with Charles Hoskins, who is, the founder of Cardano. And he's actually a really interesting dude. He's done a lot of different things, and he owns a bunch of different companies, or is at least invested in a bunch of different companies, which is why Cardano is not going to do anything, because his attention is divided. Like, he's doing 16 different things with 16 different teams. But at the end of the day, like, he has good ideas, like most entrepreneurs. But, when it comes right down to it, he's having a conversation about how quantum computing works, and he's trying to explain it as in layman's terms, right? And basically, if you think about the example that he uses is like, hey, you're out and about and you meet like this really hot chick, and you're having this conversation with her, and, she's willing to give you her phone number. So she's willing to play, but she hid it inside one book in the library over there. And then says, like, if you want her number, you got to go through all the books in the library to find her number. And so he's starting to look at, okay, how would a traditional computer solve this problem? Well, a traditional computer would literally have to go through every single book in the library one by one by one. Or you have 2 or 3 cores running, and now you have 2 or 3 workers doing the same thing, right? But it's going through a linear process, right? And that slows everything down. And this is why, things like booking websites, like flight booking websites and outcome-based type websites are very difficult bits of code to write, because you're asking a computer to consider a bunch of different possibilities, right? What a quantum computer will do is it'll read all the books at the same time. Basically, it'll basically just have the landscape of possibilities opens up drastically. But that doesn't mean that it's more that doesn't mean that it's going to be able to crack encryption. It just means that the encryption is going to have to get stronger, right? So rather than, going through all the books in the library, the quantum computer goes through them all at the same time, and it finds the number faster, which means that it needs to be more complex. It needs a more complex problem to solve. So probably what you'll see is like public-private key sets get way bigger, way more complex. But by that time, the UI will be in place, and you won't even probably deal with your private key. It'll just be hidden. It won't be a wallet anymore. It'll just be an app, right? And maybe the app is called a wallet, but you never know what your address is anymore, right? It's just like nobody knows what the IP address to their website is. They just know the domain name. The same thing will happen. It'll just get more complex, but you won't be dealing with the complexities because the UIs will advance as well. So the quantum computing thing is really not an issue. It's not going to get rid of problems. It's just going to make the types of problems that we can solve like much more difficult and faster when they are difficult.
Yeah, that's true. I think when we speak about encryption, it's like encryption basically makes it or provides so many like possibilities of outcomes that it's like impossible to just guess it. And this is why like brute forcing these days does not work, because computers are too slow, and it would take hundreds of years to, or thousands of years to encrypt such a key. And quantum computers are supposed to be, I don't have the right numbers here. Like obviously, when I say 100 times or 1,000 times faster, I don't even know. But like definitely significantly faster, and that's like the whole threat. So in the end, as you said, if you just make it more complicated to solve the problem, it should actually be enough to secure Bitcoin. But talking about Bitcoin, like it's funny because I currently I just saw a post from Peter Schiff, and it's always so good to see him, shit posting about Bitcoin once it went up, and he keeps telling people that it's a Ponzi, and it's actually so funny. Where you have like 3 or 4 tweets of like the last out of the last 5 tweets that are about Bitcoin, and we should have him on the podcast. I'd love that actually, but yeah, interesting, but. Yeah, after speaking so much about the markets, let's jump a little bit into the Goodfellas as well, as we have a pretty great week ahead, and we have a pretty cool mint in 7 days. Julie, artist of the famous Hannah X Hannah collection, is going to drop her piece Audacious in our artist incubator. She talked a lot about me, about her art and about her inspiration and her journey as an artist. Unfortunately, she's not willing to speak on spaces. She's a little insecure, but that's totally fine. Obviously, we will share what she has to say regardless. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. This will be the first ever animated piece in the Artist Incubator gallery. Jason, is that going to be a challenge to set that up?
Yeah, it's always a challenge to do something different, right? So we'll see how that goes. We've got the files. I think you sent me the files earlier, so I'm going to go through those and make sure I can create a high-res version of the animation. And as long as we can get the high-res version created, it shouldn't be an issue. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked for that. It should be a lot of fun. And like you said, first time to do an animated piece, that's I think that's kind of special. And, that's kind of her trademark. With the, she has the pieces with like a lot of times the blinking eyes, like very subtle animations. They're not over the top. So I think these will be really cool. And, I'm stoked to bring her into the fold, my friend, for sure.
Yeah. Is it like, are you, like I remember that back then when we had the mints on Truffle and you set them up, and I remember that you said that there was like so much stuff to do that every time we had the mint and mint time appeared, you felt like, okay, shit, I hope everything is going fine, everything is smooth, all the graphics work good. Do you still have that, or are you like so used to do all that stuff that it's light work?
Well, I mean, I've done it enough now to where I have a process down, and if everything goes smooth, then everything goes smooth. But I always worry because it's Web3, and it never seems to, nothing ever seems to be easy, or nothing ever seems to go 100%. So I always worry about that to some degree. I mean, maybe I worry a little bit less today. The technology has gotten a little bit better, and the UI has gotten a little bit better. And thanks to, I think the biggest thing is just like understanding what's happening behind the scenes. Because when I first started doing this, I didn't know how the NFTs were actually created or what was actually happening behind the scenes. But now that I've, created NFTs from the command line, and, I've had to edit and create and update, like I understand a little bit more about what's going on. So if I do have an issue, it's a little bit easier to troubleshoot. So, hopefully with this launch, we don't have any issues at all, and everything goes smoothly, and, life is good. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we as users, we just take all that for granted. But next time I mint, I will, I will have you in my mind when how you sit there shaking, sweating, hoping that everything goes well. So
that's pretty much it. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so on top of that, we also have a Siren Syndicate reunion coming up, and we will share all the information regarding that reunion on Mint Day. Actually, we will jump on a little special spaces on Monday 21st, and then we will give you guys instructions on what to do with your sirens, on on like how to get the reminted ones. So I'm looking forward to that. And we got some more samples, or not samples actually, final traits from Daria. And I'm so curious to find out how people are going to like what she does. I think it's great. I think it definitely shows the sirens in a new light. And yeah, I told you already, like, I preferred a lot more than the art we had before.
Yeah, for sure. She does such a great job. I mean, she posted a piece today that she had done for someone. I can't remember who. Super detailed, just a beautiful piece. She puts a lot of, time and effort into everything that she does. So the pieces that we've seen, the traits that we've seen, I mean, they're going to be, I think without, overselling it and like trying to hype it up, I can tell you with all hype and certainty that the new artwork is beautiful and that you will absolutely love it for sure. Like, that's not me being biased. It's just good work. Like, it's really well done. And anyone who knows anything about art will tell you the same thing. So I have no doubts in my mind that it's going to be well received. And, the overall form and the overall shape of the pieces hasn't changed. It's just the stylistic touch to shadowing, the stylistic touch to how the clothing is done, the stylistic touch to shading and lighting and hair, all of that stuff that basically would fit inside the context of the original pieces is just been elevated to another degree, to a whole nother degree. So from a sheer artwork standpoint, no one's going to be disappointed at all. You're going to absolutely love it.
Yeah, man. And as we'll try to get Daria on Spaces as well on that Monday. Maybe she can speak a little bit about the art, but I feel like it would be best if people would have seen something from it, like just to be able to relate and see what she means when she talks about it. But yeah, like, we can have her multiple times on Spaces, obviously. So yeah, like I said, I look forward to that. And I think the Siren Syndicate reunion is going to be great. I love to have them on Solana. And yeah, this is what we are currently focusing on. This is what we look forward to. And I also look forward to Spaces on Friday. Unfortunately, I missed them last time. Thank you, and big shout outs again to Jilly and Maria for jumping in as co-hosts. Always great to have you guys. And yeah, I think this should be it for today's episode. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we're all set, man. I'll turn it over to you for any final words.
Awesome, man. So as I said, we look forward to Friday Spaces, to see you guys around. We will obviously talk a lot about the Artist Incubator piece, Audacious. We will give you all the final information. Then we'll have the mint on Monday, and we will have Daria joining us. Hopefully, I haven't asked her yet, but I think she'll be up and speak about the new Siren Syndicate reunion, the new art. And this should be it for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We look forward to see you guys on Friday. Have a great week. And yeah, until then, bye-bye.
Take care, guys.